I am Chris Lee of Southeastern14.com, joined by Blake Lovell, also of Southeastern14.com. Blake, 3 games on tap Wednesday night in Southeastern Conference basketball. Let's go in order of tip-off. First game, we've got Georgia going to Mississippi State. No line on this game yet that we can see, but Ken Pom has got this as State a 15-point favorite at home. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear which direction people are going to side with on this one based on how the two teams have played. And I think certainly Mississippi State coming off a disappointing loss at Ole Miss in a game that we thought they could win after that, home win against Arkansas. But now I think you sort of regroup and you certainly get a different team here with Georgia, who, as we've talked about, is just a team that, quite frankly, is not played well. And, you kind of look at it. It's one of those things where take your pick on Georgia in terms of what you think you're going to get. I mean, this just isn't a very good team right now. And I think that for Mississippi State, this is kind of one of those games where we always talk about the get right games. I think this is it. Coming off that loss at Ole Miss, it's a much different matchup in terms of defensive styles and how teams play. I mean, we talked about Kermit Davis, and his teams are always going to be solid at worst on defense. But I mean, this Georgia team, they're giving up a lot of points. And so I think this is pretty straightforward here. I wouldn't be surprised if, Mississippi State comes out and takes care of business here by double digits. I think, it's always interesting, as we said, it's anytime any SEC game is played, it's always going to be hard to just, full on be confident that you're going to see a blowout, a 15-point game or more or something like that. But really, when you look at how these two teams play, I just find it very hard to believe that Georgia's going to have a lot of success slowing down Mississippi State here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Ken Pom. Mississippi State ranked 29th in adjusted offensive efficiency. Georgia's defense 281st. I don't know that I've ever seen an SEC team that low, so there's that. The other thing, though, Georgia did play Kentucky more competitively than I guess we thought in Rupp Arena, lost that one by 15. But on State's end, this is not a team that I think has hit its stride in the way it's capable. Toulouse-Smith did not play in the loss at Ole Miss. He's had foot injuries at times. He was out for that game for unspecified reasons. I still don't think that I've seen a reason given. I think we were told that it wasn't disciplinary, so I don't know any more than that. But that's one thing to watch in that game. Maybe it won't matter because State's got some other good players inside, but just some things to watch. Those are two things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe Georgia's going to find a way to win. Now, I think there is a possibility that it's a close game at times, maybe based off of what you said about, Georgia didn't play terrible at Kentucky for the most part. And, they did have a chance to beat A&M, so I think there's something to that. But this is still a team that, like we talked about, I mean, no disrespect to some of these mid-major teams they've lost to, but if you're Georgia, you're in the SEC, you should probably be winning these games. And, here they are losing 5 of 6, and 3 of those are to, mid-major competition. And so I think it's one of those scenarios where I don't think you ever know what you're going to get with Georgia this season. And I think anytime they're on the road, they're going to be kind of in this range probably against most teams, outside of maybe a couple of the other bottom tier teams, whoever those wind up being. But I think you're just going to see a situation where, for the most part, you're going to go in probably expecting Georgia to struggle. And I think the scenario here plays out a lot better for Mississippi State just because they are coming off a loss. And I think now, you sort of regroup and I think they'll be able to, potentially sort of name their score on offense here, because I just, even though I think the thing is too with this game is Mississippi State doesn't play, and they usually don't with Ben Howland. They don't play at they're not Alabama or Auburn in terms of how they play and tempo and all that, but they're efficient. And as we've said, I still look at Mississippi State and I don't see them as a team that has a lot of glaring weaknesses anywhere. And so I think that probably gives them a good chance to sort of potentially overwhelm Georgia in a game like this.
So if the line is 15, which way would you lean?
I mean, again, I think this is one where it's like, I mean, I think it's all of how you how you view Georgia. And I mean, I think Mississippi State wins by double digits. As I said, I think picking any SEC team to win a game by 15 or more, betting wise, is always a hard proposition, just because of it is still the SEC, and even a team like Georgia, as we mentioned, I mean, they only lost by 15 at Rupp, and so it's one of those where I'm usually going to be hesitant to say, oh yeah, Mississippi State's going to win this by 20 or more, but I think too Mississippi State's style of play could lend to a more methodical type of game, and so maybe that kind of helps Georgia out a little bit there, but at the end of the day, I 15 sounds about right to me, and I don't think I'm going to go to that 20 range or anything. But I think Mississippi State probably wins this by double figures, and it's just a matter of by how much at that point.
Okay, LSU and Florida tip off in Gainesville right at the same time. That'd be 7 Eastern. Xavier Pinson for LSU went down late in that game with frankly, I thought was a torn ACL at the time, the way that he fell and the way he reacted. It was not a torn ACL, it's a sprain. It sounds like, from listening to Will Wade, that it's going to be a week or two maybe, but I would think that LSU will be without Xavier Pinson, going to Florida, which played well at Auburn, by the way. Pinson plays 69% of LSU's minutes. That is third on the team. He's their point guard. What are your thoughts on this one? Ken Pom has got LSU a 3-point favorite on the road.
Yeah, this is, your classic SEC game that's probably a one-possession game with a minute to go, and I think that's sort of what you expect here in this one. And I think the Pinson situation is certainly a big one here because, I think that we talked about LSU that seemingly to this point, they've kind of just been, not on cruise control, but like they haven't really had a whole lot that's disrupted, their rhythm to this point. And I think that's, outside of that game at Auburn, they kind of just continue to, just kind of hammer away at everything here and just keep finding ways to win. And I think this could be one of those sort of, hiccups here potentially, just because we are talking about Florida, a team that they are 0-2 in the SEC, but I mean, they lost by double digits at home to Alabama, which, as we said, I mean, it's with Alabama, anyone in this league could lose by double digits at home to Alabama if they're playing well, but they could also beat Alabama, as we saw Missouri do. So Florida can maybe bounce back and win here, even though, like I just said, I mean, their first 2 losses are by double digits to, probably 2 of the top 5 teams in the league. And right here, you're looking at the second best team in the league, in my opinion, at this point, behind Auburn, and that is LSU. But the Pinson thing, I think, is just what is a little bit of an issue here potentially for LSU, just based on, how things go without him on the floor. And I still think their defense is going to be really good, but he has been pretty consistent for the most part this season in terms of, giving them a nice, production in terms of points, assists, those kind of things. I know he's turned it over a bit, but still, I mean, he's someone that's, I think, pretty valuable for them on the floor. So I think that's the big X factor here, and because we don't really have, we don't have that reference point of how does LSU play without him to this point. And I think that's where it makes it hard to know exactly what you're going to get when you take someone like that off the floor. So I, for some reason, like I said, I tend to lean towards Florida here. I just think that this is a big opportunity for Florida. I still think, as I just mentioned, I think LSU is the second best team in the league, but we always talk about these road games. And whereas, on the other one with Auburn and Alabama, we talked about on Tuesday, I went the route of the road team there, just because we talked about the inconsistency with Alabama. It's kind of the same for Florida, where they've kind of been inconsistent, but I'm going to lean the other direction this time, just because I think this is a good opportunity for them to maybe, because as we said, you don't want to be 0-3 in the SEC, but I don't know. And it's not really, we always talk about these predictions. Sometimes it's just like you have a hunch. It's just your gut feeling on some of these. And I think Florida maybe rebounds and plays pretty well here and has a chance to win this one.
Yeah, based on watching Florida play at Auburn, I kind of feel the same way. Colin Castleton was really good in that game. Their guards They don't have a lot of household names, but that's a deep bunch there. Again, with LSU's depth being affected with Pinson out, I think that has to factor in somewhere. The only hesitation I have is just Florida's inconsistency. It's not been a really good team, even at home at times. I mean, it lost to, Texas Southern at home. It lost to Alabama by 13 at home last week. So, I mean, look, you kind of take a risk anytime you're looking at Florida. But at the same time, Blake, sometimes teams start to get it together this type of year. And I just was really impressed with what I saw in Gainesville, in Auburn.
Well, and they've already, like I mentioned, they've already played Alabama and Auburn. Like, they played 2 tough games here. And I think that helps them a little bit going into a game like this. And I think that's where, with any of these teams, like we talked about it, whether it's Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, teams like that, you're taking a risk any way you slice it when it comes to these teams, because they have been very inconsistent to this point. Those are probably the 3 most inconsistent teams in the league right now. When it comes to just, you never know what you're going to get, maybe. And I'm sure, some of the others as well, like Vanderbilt's probably in that category too. But I just think it's one where it's hard for me to, kind of see this Florida team that beat Ohio State. And, but that really is like, it'd be Florida State too, but their best wins came in November and it's mid-January and they don't really have a whole lot to show for it after that. Right. And maybe it's just me trying to still hang on to the fact that, we had maybe a little bit higher expectations for where Florida would be at this point in the season, that they can win a game like this. But I think this is just more of this is a gut call here. And this is just one of those where I am fully on board the LSU train at this point. But I think, as we always say, it's tougher playing on the road than it is at home in the SEC. And this just feels like one where LSU is going to, probably be missing a pretty important piece of the puzzle. And when you take that into account, I think if Florida can play to their level that they can, and that's the big question of all of this. We can sit here and talk about this game for 30 minutes, but it's all about, is Florida going to be the good Florida or the bad Florida here? If they can be somewhat of the good Florida, I think they can at least have a chance to win this. But LSU's defense, man, they are so good, and that always makes picking against LSU hard to do, because their defense is just ridiculous at this point. And I think that they are, as I've said before, like, they're good enough to win the SEC. They're good enough to make the Final Four when they play defense the way that they play. But for some reason, I'm just gonna. This is one of those when you're making predictions, and we're gonna make a prediction for every single SEC game this season. You're gonna have some of these where maybe on paper everything's telling you pick the team that's better here, and I think LSU's better, but I just think this may be a better spot for Florida.
Okay, speaking of the good version of teams, when's the good version of Arkansas going to appear? Arkansas is going to host Missouri. It is a 12-point favorite on Ken Palm. That won 9 Eastern, and Fayetteville, Missouri, of course, scored a huge home upset of Alabama on Saturday in a game that really wasn't close for the latter part of the second half. We keep thinking Arkansas is better than this, but the team that we thought we would see all year really has not shown up for any length of time, Blake. They lost to, that's right, it was A&M last week. And was that a wake-up call for them?
I guess. Like, I think that this is a game where it's like you would have a different opinion on this game had Missouri lost to Alabama. But now it's sort of like, man, you would think that Arkansas should win this game handily. And maybe this is, kind of best case scenario where you get a Missouri team coming off such a high of beating Alabama easily, their best game all season, to now you have to go on the road, play in a tough atmosphere against a team that is essentially, there's no other way to put it. Like, this is must win for Arkansas. You can't be sitting here at 0-4 losing to 4 teams that right now, maybe all 4 of them are sitting outside the NCAA tournament conversation, I would think, right? If we're talking about Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, A&M, and Missouri, if you're 0-4, and remember, think about the conversation we had weeks ago, and I kept bringing up the point of, I think no one maybe has a more manageable first half of the SEC schedule than Arkansas, and no one has a tougher second half of the SEC schedule than Arkansas. Well, you're 0-3 with what I thought was the most manageable first half schedule of anyone in the league. If you drop to 0-4, then it is full on panic mode at that point. Because remember, after that, they go to LSU on Saturday. And so I think it is like there's, we always, I know we use that phrase a lot and it's overplayed at times, but this is must win for Arkansas. Like there's no other way to put it. You have to win this game. You can't be 0-4. You don't have anything pretty much on your non-conference resume at this point. You have to win this game. And I think they will. I think this is just one where, again, must for the most part. I think when he's had some teams over the years that have struggled a bit, as we've said. It's not like we haven't seen this before, especially last year, but it was just such a different circumstance in terms of, I think, personnel and those kind of things. But I think this is one where you will see the good Arkansas show up. I think that they understand the magnitude of a game like this. It's so important. And for Missouri, like it or not, like the Alabama game was an outlier based on what we've seen this season. That was just one of those games where a team gets hot, everything goes their way, and they win a huge game. But for the most part, everything else we had seen from Missouri on the road this season, which of course that game was at home, but everything we've seen from Missouri on the road this season has not been good at all. And so I think that's the difference here, is that when you look at Missouri's games away from home, I'm going down the schedule here. Lose by 23 to Florida State, neutral. At Liberty, lose by 21. At Kansas, lose by 37. Neutral against Illinois, lose by 25. At Kentucky, lose by 27. There's a story. Like, if you can't expect Missouri to win this game on the road based on the fact that they have lost by double digits. And I think outside of that game against SMU, they've lost by double digits in every other road game they played this season, or game away from home. So Arkansas is the pick here, but man, you just, like I said, the Missouri playing well against Alabama sort of plants that in the back of your head. But I think the difference there is one was in Columbia and this one is not.
Arkansas is going to want to play at a fast pace. Missouri kind of average in terms of tempo, although it slows teams down a little bit on the defensive end. How do you think in terms of pace of play this one will play out?
I think Arkansas is going to try to run this thing as though it's, I don't know, like they
drive it like you stole it.
I mean, they are going to have to push this thing and get up 100 shots in this. I mean, like that's how they win this game. That they can't play Missouri's type of game here, and that's where. So I always say, I mean, statistically, you can look at it however you want to, but you know what you're going to get from a Conzo Martin team defensively. And look, some teams are better than others, and this one's obviously not been great, but I still think you're going to have some challenges at times with some of these teams. But remember though, it's not like Missouri played a flawless defensive game against Alabama. I mean, they just played they executed offensively better than they have all season long. So I think that's the difference in that game. And remember, we rely on statistics over a longer period of time than just one game. And that's where, this still is a Missouri team that is a just horrible 3-point shooting team, statistically at 25%. And they're going to get all their points pretty much from inside the arc and from the free throw line. And that's where I think if you're Arkansas, which is really kind of similar to what Arkansas does, as we've talked about too, they're not a great 3-point shooting team. So this is a game that will be played, in the paint. I think you'll have a lot of and this may be your free throw game of the week here in terms of how many free throws are shot in this game, potentially with how these two teams play. It's going to be more of an attacking type of style here. And I just think that for Arkansas, you've got to make this a track meet here. If they do, I think they'll win this game just fine. Like we said, I mean, it's always a track meet when you play Alabama, and Missouri seemed to work just fine in that. So,
any final thoughts on these three matchups, Blake?
No, should be interesting. Certainly Florida LSU, I think most intriguing of the bunch. But like we mentioned, you've also got an Arkansas team here that's just in a must-win mode now, and must-win or must-win. Can we adopt that? Can we do must-win?
I kept waiting for you to say it. You said it a couple of times, and I picked up on it, and now we've just made it official.
I think at some point we'll not just be people that cover the SEC. We'll be a T-shirt company, right? That's what everyone does at this point. So we'll make our own shirts, and that'll be our business. But yeah, I think those are the most interesting aspects of this slate.
Okay, we've got a special deal for our Tennessee customers or Tennessee listeners. Tell folks a little bit about that.
Yep, Action 24/7. We'll put the link in the description. Of course, this will be on YouTube, even though we're doing audio here. It'll be on YouTube, and you can find the link to Action 24/7 We've got a promo code, South14. You can use that if you click on the link in the description, and they will match your first deposit up to $800, I believe it is. And so, yeah, lots of SEC games going on now, and a lot more interesting matchups. I know it's kind of harder to bet the non-conference games sometimes, but once you get in these conference games, it's a lot more fun. So you can check out the description, click on that link, enter the code South14, and there you go.
He is Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We'll be back on Wednesday to review Tuesday night's SEC basketball action.